All right, let's get started. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you from whichever part of the world you're joining us from. I hope all of you are staying healthy and safe. My name is Praveen Umanath, and I lead marketing for BrowserStack. And I'm really excited to kick off our webinar with the Carousell team. Carousell is a leading mobile and web-based online marketplace for buying and selling new and secondhand goods in the Southeast Asia region. In this webinar, Syam Sasi, Senior Software Engineer, and Prabhagharan DK, Senior Software Engineer from Carousell, will share Carousell's journey, automation testing journey with BrowserStack, and how they're running tests against each pull request with effective parallel execution with the help of Docker containers. They will also share how BrowserStack is helping engineers enable testing while working from home. So I'd like to thank you all for attending this webinar. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping pointers. Number one, we will be recording this webinar and we'll be sharing the link with you post this webinar. We'll also be publishing this on our YouTube channel. In terms of questions, we will be taking questions at the end of the webinar. So while the webinar is going on, you can use the Q&A button in the Zoom interface and ask your questions through that. And at the end of the webinar, we'll save 15 to 20 minutes to address all of your questions. Great. So with that out of the way, let me spend a few minutes introducing you to BrowserStack. So BrowserStack was started 9 years ago by our co-founders Ritesh and Nakul. Working out of a coffee shop, Ritesh and Nakul launched BrowserStack to solve a problem that they kept encountering as developers, right? How do they test their websites on IE? So they were using Macs, and they were not able to test their website on Internet Explorer. So to solve that problem, they started BrowserStack. And within 6 months of starting BrowserStack, they had 1,000 paying customers. Now, 9 years later, we have 4 offices: San Francisco, Mumbai, Dublin, and New York. And we have over 600 employees. We have a base of 25,000 plus customers. This includes industry leaders like Microsoft, Twitter, Spotify, Verizon, ESPN, Warner, RBS, Barclays, and MasterCard. With their trust, we've become the de facto platform for testing on for enterprises. Open source technologies that power the internet are tested on BrowserStack. 5 years ago, we partnered with jQuery to make the internet more compatible. Since then, we've worked with countless different open source projects to make innovation accessible and compatible. We've worked with projects such as Angular, Ember, and Mozilla. Our platform of 2,000 plus browsers and real mobile devices supports a massive scale of testing. We have 2 million plus registered users who run 72 billion Selenium commands on our platform every year. And we have users from over 135 countries. And we have 15 globally distributed data centers across 12 different locations around the globe. The world's largest cloud providers rely on BrowserStack to test for testing infrastructure. The world's best detailer, the world's best search engine, the world's best database provider, and the world's best enterprise company. All of them use BrowserStack to run their tests. Let me spend a couple of minutes talking about the products that we have on our platform, right? So we have 5 main products today. The first is Live, which is a tool that helps you do interactive cross-browser testing on our 2,000 plus browsers and devices. Second product is Automate, which is the most reliable automated testing platform on the market. With Automate, you can run your Selenium tests on our high-performance grid for quick deterministic feedback. Our latest addition is Percy, who we acquired and announced just a couple of months ago in July. Percy enables you to deliver pixel-perfect UI with visual testing. With Percy, you can integrate visual testing into your existing CI/CD pipeline and review visual changes with every commit. App Live provides interactive mobile app testing for both your Android and iOS apps. So you can test both your native and hybrid iOS and Android apps on our grid of 2,000 plus devices, real mobile devices. And lastly, we have App Automate, which allows QA engineers to execute instant automated mobile app tests using a variety of frameworks, including Appium, Espresso, XUI Test, and Earl Grey. Great. So with that quick introduction, I'm going to hand it off to Syam, and he's going to get started with talking about the Carousell's journey when it comes to test automation. Over to you, Syam.
Thank you so much, Praveen. Uh, Welcome, everyone. For today's webinar, we will talk about Carousell automation journey with BrowserStack. So about Carousell, we are one of the world's largest, fastest growing mobile classified apps. So we do sell second-hand goods online. So you can relate us like the OLX or Cooker. So our mission is to inspire every person in the world to start selling and buying to make more possible for another. So Carousel was founded by Surya, Lucas, and Marcus in 2012. So we have presence in six market, mainly in Southeast Asia. So about the speakers, myself Syam, and I'm a senior software engineer at Carousel. I'm also one of the co-founder of the Tequila meetup groups in Singapore, and I have done few open source contributions such as Relative Expert Helper Chrome extension, and I have got a chance to speak at a few events across the world. And my co-speaker is DK. Prabhagharan, would you like to introduce?
Sure. Hi everyone. I'm DK. I work as a senior software engineer in Carousel. So I have around close to 9 years of experience in overall software testing field. Yeah. Thank you, Sean.
Okay, so this is today's agenda. So we will be talking about how did we start our automation journey and different types of test runs that we use at Carousel, and a basic idea about how does our Carousel test framework and how do we do parallelizing the test runs with Docker containers, and lastly, testing in a day-to-day working from life. Uh, let's start about how did we start the test automation in Carousel. So back in 2017, there were only 3 test engineers in our team, and we had 2 release cycle per month. So on alternative Fridays, we had the release, and the release was purely manual. So we needed to manually execute all the regression runs or the release runs on the Friday, and at the end of the day, we used to submit the bill to the App Store and Play Store. So this was getting more and more manual effort, and we started automating the release test cases. So initially we started with running all the automated runs on our on-premise simulators and emulators. On one day, as part of one of the internal hackathon event, we built something called the device stand. So the device stand consisted of 2 Android phones and 2 iOS phones with a Mac Mini connected to it. And we were running all our automated test cases on this setup. It was working well, but as the time passes by, then we started seeing a lot of issues, like there were device specific issues. Sometimes the battery was not charging. Sometimes the OS dialog boxes were appearing on, especially on iPhone, the OS update pop-up randomly appearing on the screen, and it was preventing the automation runs. Then we started adding more and more test cases, and the total execution time began to increase. And we had only 2 phones, two Android and 2 iOS phones, so we couldn't do more parallel test cases, and it needed occasional maintenance as well. Also, the funniest thing is that sometimes people didn't know that this is our continuous testing setup, and some people thought it's a device charging station and used to disconnect the USB charger and connect their phones to charge their phones. So we started evaluating multiple vendors for automation testing. So we come up with our own selection criteria. So the Carousel Labs has using the camera. So everyone, if you want to list something, you need to take the photo of the item and you need to list. And the people can chat each other. So we had such special requirements. So we added all these points into our selection criteria, and we started evaluate against our cloud providers. And finally, we selected BrowserStack as the best suitable tool for us and started using it. Yeah, the types of test runs. The first one is release sanity test. This is something we are running on every Friday. So our release cycle began to be like after we added the automated runs, we were in such a position to release our apps on every week. So we have this sanity test on happening on every Thursday night, and we will be getting the report on Friday morning. And of course, there are some test cases which is manually being executed. Once we complete that one, we are ready to ship our product on the Friday. The next type of runs like event tracking test, it's similar like the analytic test. So the event tracking also important. So you need to make sure that all the events are being stored in the database correctly. So we are using BrowserStack for testing whether our events are filed correctly or not. So this is we are leveraging the existing APM scripts, and we are checking with the network logs whether the event has been fired. Also, there is an end-to-end test whether the events has been stored in the database or not. A nightly regression test, you guys might be already familiarized with. It's a normal regression test, but we have multiple squads in Carousell, and every squad has different types of test. But we are using a single mono repository to combine all these tests together. And this is part of our test framework and test suite and test framework. And we will be running it against the BrowserStack. The last type of test, like fast feedback test, this might be a new time for at least for few of you guys. And what fast feedback test is, how fast you can do the feedback once the code available. So let's go some details into this one. So this is nothing but running the functional UI test for every code changes. So which means that whenever the developer opens a pull request, then we will be testing that particular chunk of code. So whenever there is a PR ready to be tested, we will be generating a specific build for that particular build. And we have our internal infrastructure called Carousell. So that's the name that we are calling for our testing infrastructure, which consists of BrowserStack. Then we have Android simulators and iOS simulators. The Carousell determines where all these tests need to be running, and it will be running against that build. So if that build failed, then the developer get the notification that hey, some of your tests failed for this pull request, please fix that one. And if it is an automation issue, then we will be fixing that one and we will be rerunning that job. If it is passed, then yeah, you are okay to merge the code and you can go ahead with the PR. Yeah, all these scenarios supposed to be happen within 20 minutes. That's the goal that we have started. So we were able to add the test cases and finish every process within 20 minutes with the help of BrowserStack with multiple slots. The next part will be taken by Prabhagharan. So Prabhagharan will be discussing about the Carousell test framework as well as how we're gonna do the parallel execution. Over to you, Prabhagharan.
Thank you, Syam. Just a minute, I'll share my screen. Yeah. So before getting into the parallelization, how we are doing the parallelization for our test runs, first I would like to explain the overall test framework and what are the things that we initially considered while designing this test framework. These are some of the high-level criteria that we put before designing this test framework. So one is like we wanted to target all the three major platforms: Android, iOS, and web. And also we wanted to use most of our code base. So basically we wanted to define the scenario once and then use the same set of step definitions, same page objects and everything, and run our test. So basically, we do not want different code base. So that ruled out the native automation frameworks like Espresso or XUID. So yeah, overall the test tech stack looks like this. So we use Cucumber and we define all our UI tests in BDD fashion, and we use Appium or Selenium based on the platform that we wanted to run, and Java as our main language, and then Maven for distributing the builds. So basically, we use a Jira plugin called TM4J, wherein so this helps us to define all the test test scenarios side by side with the requirements. So all our test scenarios, BDD scenarios, sits in Jira itself. And next is Jenkins for overall build, and we do the static code analysis for our test framework itself. So we use SonarCheck for that. And the second is, last thing is like we run the tests in two different platforms. One is BrowserStack, and second one is, as Syam mentioned, we have an inbuilt in-house virtual device farm. So we run some amount of tests in that also. So currently we have around 150 end-to-end UI automation or cases. Yeah, so the overall architecture looks something like this. So we have the entire thing is splitted into two components. So our core test framework and the test suite. So the core test framework is kind of acts as the core integration between other tools like Selenium, Appium, or any other BrowserStack or any other tools. And this test suite has all the step definitions, page objects, and everything defined. So the core framework is kind of a dependency for our test suite. So yeah, based on the properties that we pass to the test framework during the test run, it will pick up either Appium or browser Selenium to automate. Again, in Appium, based on the platforms that we pass, it will pick up either Android or iOS. Yeah, now coming to the test parallelization. Yes, I already said, so we have, at the time we had around 150 test cases and around 10 BrowserStack slots. So basically we wanted to parallelize all our executions so that we use all the 10 slots at a time. So since we use Cucumber as our base, actually Cucumber doesn't support an inbuilt way to distribute the test across multiple devices. So what we did is like we wrote a small Java plugin, which is like a dependency for our test framework. What that Java plugin does is, so based on the device count we pass, let's say I have 10 slots or 20 slots, based on the device count we pass and based on the number of test cases we have, it splits and creates different property files. Say for example, I have 100 tests and I have 10 slots. It will create 10 property files, property 1, property 2, property and 3 and so on. And it will configure the first 10 test to the property 1 and second 10 tests to the property 2 and so on. So also what this finally does is it will create multiple threads based on the device count. So again, for 10 devices to be executed parallelly, it will create 10 thread, and the thread 1 will be using the property 1, thread 2 will be using the property 2 and so on. So yeah, and each of this thread will open up a BrowserStack session. So all this worked pretty well. So we were not facing any issues initially. Then once we started growing our test, we started seeing some problems. So first one is all the tests are not equally distributed. So we observed that some of our property file had 10 tests, some of the property file had some around 5 tests, and so those were not evenly distributed. And second major problem is, so some of the devices were left unused. During our regression run, when we look at the BrowserStack interface, we observe, okay, we have 10 slots, but only 8 are being used, 2 are not being used. Why? So when we debug the issue, so what happened is, since the properties or the tests are tied to the thread, let's say if some of the tests say take some more than usual time, then all the tests waiting for that thread are getting blocked. For example, let's say thread 1 is in charge or tied to 1, 2, 3 tests, and test 1 and test 2, test 3, and thread 2 is tied to 4, 5, 6. For example, if test 1 takes longer than usual, test 2 and 3 will be blocked. At time, there are chances thread 2 might have executed all the 3 tests already and released the BrowserStack device. So yeah, we wanted to, and also overall, it increases the execution time. So what we decided is, like, we wanted to redesign this, and we wanted to overcome all these issues. So yeah, so we sat down and redesigned the entire this parallelization process. So this is our version 2. The first thing that we did was requirements. So whatever the test framework needed to execute the test, everything were separated out, and we created it as a Docker containers. So it contained Java, it contained Maven and everything. So then, since we wanted to utilize this or optimize the utilization of the devices, we wanted to make use of the queues. So it is like distributing of the jobs. So whenever some device or some device is free, the Docker should pick up the job from the queue, and then it should execute it. So the final output is something like this. Let's say if Jenkins is started, it will fetch all our test cases based on the properties or parameters that we pass in the Jenkins from the TM4J. Then it queues to the a job queue. So here, job queue is something like a AWS queue, FIFO queue you can consider. So this job queues so yeah, Jenkins will enqueue all these jobs. So one by one, since this Dockers are already polling for the jobs continuously, it will pick up these jobs one by one or test case one by one and execute it and send back the results to the result queue. So right now, if you see, it executed something like, it started executing with 4 tests, and let's say if some jobs are in the queue, it will pick up that and run it. So for example, it will finally it will execute all the jobs and send the results, and Jenkins will aggregate all the results and send or make the build fail or pass. Yeah, so I'd like to give a short demo of whatever I explained, the version 2 of our solution. So here is the demo. Yeah, so here I'm starting a test run with the whatever parameters that we usually pass. We pass those parameters and then just start it. So basically it pulls the code base, cleans the workspace and everything, and also it will download the latest app from our archive. So we maintain a GCP archive. So it will download the latest app and upload it to BrowserStack, and it gets a test run. So when you see it creates a test, when it runs the test, what it actually does is it will enqueue all the messages to the AWS SQS queue. And this is sample messages that it enqueued. So it has all the properties, dynamic properties that is passed. So here, if you see before, it had, sorry. Yeah, it passed the, yeah, now this is our AWS queue. So here we have all the messages got enqueued, and the Dockers running behind this will pick up these messages one by one, and it will initiate a BrowserStack session. Yeah, you can see all our tests are getting queued up here. Yeah, this is how current parallelization works. So by this, we have reduced our overall execution time and also optimized the use of the BrowserStack slots. Yeah, with this, I will pass back to Syam to continue the presentation.
Thank you, DK. Yep. So the amid COVID-19 situation has hit at every space, and quality engineering is not an exception to it, right? So majority of us are working from home, and as a tester, it's not easy because the communication is important for us, and there can be a lot of missing pieces when we are working from home as a quality engineer, because we needed to have proper communication with everyone in the team, including the developers, the product owner, the business analyst, and everyone. So I'm just categorizing all these phases into 6. The first one in terms of automated test. So luckily, most of our tests are already on cloud, which has of the COVID-19 really didn't affect our automated test. So like in the beginning, I mentioned we have 3 kinds of infrastructure, testing infrastructure at Carousell. One is BrowserStack. The second one is Carousell. Carousell has 2 subdivisions, one for Android simulators and second one for iOS simulators. The iOS simulator portion affected it because all the iOS simulators need the Mac machine as a hardware, and we have kept a 6 MacBook at office. We have enabled the VPN to access to all this machine from home, but sometimes there were issues like the VPN was automatically disconnecting. Sometimes the Mac machines unable to dictate the Wi-Fi. So we needed to visit the office occasionally, which was not possible as per the regulations. So we decided to stop using that and moving all these tests to BrowserStack. So the next one, exploratory testing. This is part of our sprint life cycle where anyone in the team should be able to do the testing. So it not only about a test engineering does the testing. So it's about making the entire team enabled for the testing. And we have a few devices, test devices at office prior to the pandemic situation. And everyone was sharing all these test devices. So if someone from one squad need to be tested on a specific phone, then we had few Android and iOS phones at office, and they used to pick it up, and after the testing they used to return it back. But since everyone has started working from home, this became very difficult, because if you look at an Android engineer will be always using Android for no matter what happens, right? So if an Android engineer would like to test it on iPhone, as part of exploratory testing. For example, it's like we have something program called peer testing session during the sprint, which means that during the stand-up, we used to inquire the team, hey, I have a story to be tested today and who is available for testing. So this question will be asked to the team, not only always to the test engineer. Of course, a test engineer can take it, but it's open for anyone. So whoever has the bandwidth for testing on that day, they should be able to take it. But it's difficult during the work from home condition, like they might not have access to the phone. That's where the app live comes into the picture. So what we have done, we have created a dedicated team email for each squad, and we have shared with which the team. So using the team email, every squad able to log into BrowserStack app live, and they are able to select any of the Android and iPhones. So that really helped the team. Another use case that we have low internet bandwidth testing. Like I mentioned earlier, we are using the chat feature, and the chat can really go wrong if you're traveling, especially if you're in a metro and if the metro passing through a tunnel, or if you are going to an area where you don't have that much network coverage, then the chat can be failing. So the low internet profile testing with BrowserStack really helping us in terms of testing all these scenarios where you can set all the different combinations of the internet bandwidth, and you can test it on the real phones. So that one part we solved using BrowserStack. Another use case, if you have a bug on a specific device and that has been reported in the production, and we would like to verify it, and if that device is available on BrowserStack, it's quite easy for us to log into that phone and just verify the bug. Inspecting the mobile elements is part of developing the automation scripts. We are using Appium, and we are using Appium desktop to inspect the elements, but BrowserStack, this beta version called inspect elements, if you are using the app live, where you can see the entire DOM structure of the mobile app screen. This is very helpful for us in terms of writing the new automated test cases, because you can see all the ID, all the iOS and NS predicate. If you're using the another UI automator syntax, quite easy to find out the DOM structure and add to your test suite. The last part that helped us so much in terms of finding the network logs associated with the automation run, as well as the manually executing test cases. So BrowserStack provides the network logs for all the API calls that has been happened during the test session. So especially this is very handy when it's when we go for the event tracking test or analytic test, and from the network logs you can see that whether the event has been fired or not. Or let's say if there is any special cases, one page doesn't load, and if an API returns a 500, then you can easily check on the log, and you can have a high-level root cause debugging with the network logs. So these are the major 6 phases that the BrowserStack really helping us during the work from home situations. Yeah, I think that's the end of the session. So over to you, Praveen.
Great. Thanks, Syam. I think it's a great presentation. I think it was interesting to see the journey moving from your own lab and people using it for charging to moving to a fully scaled setup. So some funny stories. Great. So we have quite a few questions. So I think just before I start, I just wanted to sort of let everybody know that we do have a exclusive pack for all the attendees. So I'm just pasting that link in the chat again. So you guys can just get in here and claim your pack. This basically offers 1 month free access to all the BrowserStack products. So if you're interested in trying it out, I encourage all of you to attend or link to this page and fill out the form, and we'll get you hooked up as soon as possible. All right, let's dive into some questions. Okay, So I think one question is around, you talked about, Syam, in the beginning about fast feedback when the developer submits the PR running those tests. So the question is, if you're already running regression tests, what value do fast feedback tests provide if they're already a subset of your regression tests?
That's a good question. So yes, fast feedback tests are a subset of the regression test. But the question should be like when we are running the regression test. So we are running the regression test only one time in a day. So basically it's a nightly job. So what about a developer that commits a code at morning 10 a.m.? When the developer get the feedback that hey, something has broken, one critical functionality is broken because of this commit. So these fast feedback tests are very fast. We are not really dealing with any very complex test cases over here. It's a simpler checks, but whatever be the tests that we picked up for the fast feedback test are critical for our application. So this is to just give the confidence to the team that because of this commit, nothing major has been broken. So also I've talked about everything should be finished within less than 20. So we cannot run the entire regression suite for every code commit. So that's why we are running the subset of the regression run as part of this process.
Good. Okay. Could you talk a little bit more about the static code analysis that you guys do as part of your testing process?
I didn't mention anything about static code analysis.
I think it was the Sonar, you were using SonarQube? Or?
Can you take it?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So static code analysis, like, you can attach the SonarQube check to your PR, and it will make sure if it has any security vulnerabilities in your code, or if it is of right format, and if it has a proper code coverage for your code and everything. So actually, we use it strictly for our test framework also. So basically, we treat our test code base also as like kind of a production level code. So we use in both in test and all the production level services.
Okay. Good. Okay. I think when you were explaining, both of you were explaining sort of the test infrastructure that you have at Carousell. Talked about Carousell and BrowserStack. So I think a few people had a question around why do you have two separate types of infrastructure or two different instances? A locally hosted one with emulators and simulators, and why BrowserStack? So what is the value, or what are the purposes that each of these serve?
Okay. So the thing is, so we mainly use the Carousell for our PR checks. So we have very limited amount of slots available from BrowserStack, and we wanted to use that fully for our regression. And since the PR request, or the request comes from the PR, is not controlled by us, so there may be at a given time it can run like 4 to 5 PRs at a time. So in that case, we needed more devices. So for that, we basically use the Carousell. So whatever tests, so our fast feedback test itself is like kind of small suite, which doesn't have any like major tests, but it will make sure our app is not breaking in most of the pages when user reaches most major pages. So yeah, that's how we leverage the Carousell infrastructure, and our BrowserStack instance we use for daily regressions. So all the tests, like including the device specific test or any other, the test that needs the camera, everything that we leverage BrowserStack.
Good. Okay. Great. I think early on in your deck, you had spoken. I think Syam, you had spoken about event-based tests.
Yep.
So I think the question is around how are you doing that? In terms of like low-level tests, and why are we not using like API/backend tests for that?
Yeah, so why we have started this special test, because our data team had a lot of events to be tested, and currently they are executing all these events very manually. So people used to do manual testing, and they used to check the BigQuery in the data table whether the event has been stored or not. So they approached us and asked, hey, you guys are running the automated test, and whether it's possible to check the event has been fired when you are running the automated, when already running along with the automated test. So we started with all the critical events that we supposed to test, and regarding whether we can do it using API or not, that quite debatable, because the issues that the team has faced happens because it was not firing from the app. I mean, from the real phone. So we needed to test it with the real phone, and we try to start it with our internal setup, where we try to run and collect the network logs. But setting up the whether you can capturing the network log was quite painful, because you need to set up either man in the middle proxy or Charles proxy, and if you are going for parallel execution, you need to do it for multiple simulators or real phone, and you need to collect all this log. So we have been evaluating how BrowserStack can solve this issue. So if you are enabling the network logs, then BrowserStack will provide you the network logs for the current session. And if you are parsing the logs properly, then you can see whether the event has been fired or not. Also, you can have a check to the database if you want, but that could be part of an integration test. So that part can be moved to integration test, but whether the app is firing the event, that make more meaningful if you are testing it on a real phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Next, moving on, we have a couple of questions around Docker, your Docker environment setup. One is, how do you attach any volumes to the Docker containers to retain any sort of dynamic test data that's generated during your test? And secondly, how do you tell the Docker container, or I guess broadly, like, when you instantiate the Docker container and you start running tests from that container, how do you distribute or allocate the mobile devices, right? How do you tell that particular container, the test running for that particular container, that pick these devices and run the tests on these devices?
So yeah, for answering the first question, the test data, I think actually we are not mounting any volume or anything. So all the test data will be either created dynamically, or it will fetch the test data which we already store in some database. The second one is like all the properties will be passed. I mean, basically what device to run or what app to use. All those things will be passed as a passed in the message itself. So those will be used as the properties. So when we start the run, we configure the properties through Jenkins, and it will be passed in the message that we enqueue in the job queue. So that way our test framework will pick up those from the queue and the message, and then it will.
Got it. Okay. Great. Okay. So next set of questions is around sort of your build times, right? So I think one is how long do your nightly regressions take? And in your nightly regressions, do you also test all the different sort of combinations? How do you decide on the coverage of the different devices that you need to test on, OS and let's say hardware combinations that you do test on?
DK?
Sorry. So
the question is around how long do your nightly regressions take? And do you test on different browsers or different devices during your nightly regressions, and what is the process you guys use to determine that?
Okay, so basically the overall nightly regression takes around 1 hour or 1 hour 45 minutes kind of. So basically the entire suite we run in like different teams or squad wise. So basically, it's up to them to configure whenever they wanted to run. The devices and the OS, it's whatever is majorly used. So we use that for our, from the data team, we have the data, get the data, and then we configure that mobile device and the OS version.
Good. Okay. And secondly, I think just around the runtime thing, you talked about your sort of fast feedback tests getting executed in 20 minutes or less. So how do you do that? Like, what is your sort of optimization process there?
One is, so basically that's where the Carousell comes in. So for every PR, we try to run around 10 to 15 tests, and those will be very, very small and minimum tests. And we have, using the Terraform, we can run up to 50 simulators at the same time. So this is how we try to minimize the test runtime, and overall test build process or the app build process itself will take some time based on the platform. For example, usually iOS takes a bit longer than usual. So that is something we cannot control. So dev team also helped us to optimize the build process for the app.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, just adding on to that. So there are two parts, like DK said. One is how long it will take to get the build. If it is APK or IPA file, how long we need to wait to get the build. So only once we get the build, only we can proceed with testing that build, right? So we need to get the help on how we can optimize the total build execution time. And the second aspect is that how many developers are committing at the same time. So let's say if multiple developers are opening a PR at the same time, then we also need to support it. So every PR should be getting a result back within 20 minutes. So if you already use maybe a 10 device, which means that we cannot wait until that all the 10 test cases has been executed. That's why we are using the Carousell on a bare metal AWS server, which supports up to 70 simulators. So we decided that for this fast feedback check, the emulators and simulators are enough. We are not testing it on the real devices. So the regression and the squad based release test, then yeah, we are running it on the real devices only.
Okay. Okay, let's move on. I think the next question, okay, so a couple of questions on how testing happens in general, right? So one is, do you have sort of any manual human testers in your in Carousell? And second is, in a sort of a agile sprint, which is typically 2 weeks, is it possible to sort of create automation in that period of time?
Okay. So the first question, whether there are any human testers, yes, we are. So there are some test cases that need to be manually executed. So especially for the release, all the automated test only executed at BrowserStack, and we will getting a report, and the report contains the test cases that need to be manually executed. For example, we have a test case called shake. So you shake the app and the developer option should not be displayed, because there was a bug earlier, like because if you shake the app, then you can select to switch between the staging and the production environment. So you cannot really automate the shake feature, and you need to verify that none of the users should see this option when you're shaking the phone. So we are automating, and some of the finance related stuff, like we have something called the top spot, like where if you purchase that, your ads will be always seeing on the top of the list. And since it we are for the release test, we are running against the production, and we don't want to automate this particular feature. So such features we are manually executing and verifying it. And yeah.
Okay. And I think the second question is around the agile sort of sprints, and how do you guys think about writing test cases?
So It already depends on the capacity of the team. So whether it's if you have a dedicated tester for automating the new test cases, or if the entire team can contribute towards this, then why not? But if there is a only tester, and if it's a really a shared tester across multiple teams and very limited resources there, then it's gonna be a painful process. So especially then if you have an A/B testing also, like if your new feature gonna behave entirely different in the production, then you need to support the A/B testing as well. So if you have the resource and if you have the infrastructure, you can always go for it. At least not really combining all the positive and negative test case, at least we can go ahead with positive. But considering the fact that it can be changing at any point of time, and the earlier we automate, the better. But that's a real change of mindset. You need the help from the entire team in order to achieve it. If you're thinking about only the test engineer is responsible for that one, it's really difficult to achieve.
All right. Okay, couple of questions around parallelization. So how do you handle parallelization in test cases that sort of have an impact on each other, right? So if one test case is changing a certain setting and another test case is dependent on that setting not changing, for example. So how do you sort of manage dependencies between test cases when you're parallelizing?
Okay, I think, yeah, okay. So actually we have this is kind of a best testing or test scripting practice. So no two tests should have dependency on each other. So if it has a dependency, then that is a one single test that you should. So for example, you wanted to change some, so yeah, you might ask like, it will increase my overall run time. So in that case, so maybe you can consider something like automating the initial steps via some API or any other in the background process, and then do whatever verification you wanted to do in the UI. So basically, we do not have, none of our tests has any dependency on each other. So everything has its own test data, its own users and everything.
Okay, good. And secondly, around parallelization, do you have a recommendation, because there are different ways in which you can parallelize. You could run the same set of tests on different devices, let's say in this case, or you could run like multiple tests on the same device, right? Same type of devices. Do you have a preference at Carousell, and sort of do you have any sort of I guess tips or recommendations on how to think about parallelization?
Right now, when we run one job or one test, so it will be like same kind of devices. We automate. But yeah, actually it will be quite easy to debug also, because you know what device you wanted to test and you know what tests might fail. When you automate in different devices at the same time, it may be chaotic to analyze your test runs, or you do not know, which test case will be tagged to which device. Yeah, we prefer to run in same device at a time. And it's kind of configurable way. So when we start the Jenkins job, we can configure which device we want.
Yeah. So we have a priority of functionality over the device coverage. So we initially want to make sure that our functionality works fine. And if you would like to go for another device, we would like to set up another job to cover all these devices.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, makes sense. Okay. Second set of questions. Okay, so one is where do you upload your artifacts, like your APK or IPA files or any other artifacts required for running your automated tests? That's the first question.
So we use Google Bucket, Google GCP a lot. So we upload all our artifacts or apps and everything there. So previously we also tried S3, AWS S3. So it's more or less similar.
Good. And then I think, yeah, once you're running those tests on BrowserStack, then you can upload it via an API, right, to the BrowserStack cloud.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So basically, we fetch it from GCP based on the app version that we want to run, and then upload it to BrowserStack for that run.
Got it. And do you use any separate tools or CLI commands for your fast feedback testing in terms of for front of side? I guess the question is around front end / fast forward testing. Or do you use any separate tools or CLI commands there?
I'm not getting that actually, but no, there is no. I mean, same test framework we use for.
Okay. Next question is, how do you review your test code, right? So we have the programming when you're writing code, and when you're writing test suites, how do you
so basically that? Again, it's in the PR check. So mainly we check what assertion that test script is doing, and what's the main motive of the test. I mean, it's basic code review process, and if needed, developers also involved in making that we are writing the proper test.
Yeah, it's like the normal code review, just like any other development process where you open a pull request and you invite your team members to review it, and you need a minimum 2 approval. So which means that 2 people need to review your code, and these 2 people will thoroughly support your code, the design practices, or if simple things like if there is any spelling mistake, or if you are using any static code, can we move it to do another Spring framework, or basic code level checking has been done already. So, and also a few things like when you open the PR, our test framework has around 100 unit test cases. So all these unit test cases will be running against our test framework. So I'm talking about not the app unit test cases. I'm talking about the unit test cases for testing our test framework. So this will be running. So you will be able to merge the code only all these unit test cases and has been passed. Yeah.
Also we maintain some solid Git commit templates, so that make sure that you have proper checks in place.
Okay, we have a lot of questions. All right, how do you test interrupts? In an app while making sure that your application, when there's a message coming in, incoming message or a phone call, and your application is interrupted, and then how do you test that it resumes to the correct state?
Yeah. So right now we are not automating that one. This is a manually executing test case right now, but with the help of the emulators, I think you can, if you're using AppM, then I have tried this, like you can add the code to make a call in between. So what AppM will do, if your test been executing and you will be getting suddenly you get a call in between, and the call will be happening for 2-3 seconds as per your configuration, and then app will be coming out with the state. So you can resume your testing over there. So it could be automated with the emulators. I mean, I have tried this 2-3 years ago, then it was not supporting on the real device. I'm not sure about the current status.
Got it. Yeah, I think with BrowserStack, we do have things like push notifications. You can test, those kinds of interrupts, and we are working on things like SMS and phone call based sort of interrupts, and how to make sure that your tests take into account all of those interrupts. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so do you have a situation at Carousell where you are moving between like a mobile app and a web view, or a website view, right? How do you test for that? And how do you handle that in your test cases?
We have a few scenarios where we are moving to the web view. It's not like opening a browser. So it's like within the app itself, we have the web view for that one. So AppM provides you, something called switching the context, some mobile view to the web view. So AppM provides this capability to do that. So our framework also supporting that, and it's quite easy to do that.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Great. I think we are out of time. So thanks a lot, Syam and Prabhagharan. It's really great to sort of hear the story of Carousell and hear how you've sort of built and taken your test automation up to such a large scale. Thanks a lot again for all your time and stay safe, stay healthy, and we will again to everyone else. We've recorded this session, so we will be sharing these URLs. The URL to the video, which will also be published on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to claim your special pack, which you can do on the URL that I've shared on the chat. Right, so you will get 1 month free access to all the BrowserStack products. Great. Thanks everyone for attending. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you.